Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And this is going to be a bit of a different episode, I guess, in terms of what we have to talk about. Definitely on the more downside of things in terms of the news that has happened over the weekend. And only have one kind of news and note to kind of start off today's episode, but we also have the Bahrain Grand Prix, the crazy opening 4 laps that it was, and then after that, there's nothing really to discuss, but the first 4 laps is definitely noteworthy, and we're going to take our time and our due diligence, to break that down and just bring you up to date on everything that's happened since the opening lap carnage that involved Romain Grosjean in the Bahrain Grand Prix. So we've got plenty of stuff to talk about in today's episode, but before we get into that, how you doing today, Kyle? After a wild Bahrain Grand Prix, when all of the motorsports is gone, F1 kind of is giving us the news when we maybe have a lack of it.
Yeah, doing well. Was glad that I was able to watch the race live. Actually was able to catch some of the F2 action over the weekend as well, which was fantastic racing on the F2 side as well. But yeah, coming out of the weekend, mainly just thankful for everything in terms of safety in motorsports, and thankful for the people involved, whether that be doctors, marshals, basically everybody. It was a very eye-opening / kind of a reminding weekend of what we are involved in here in motorsports, what we do ask and appreciate of these drivers. So doing good, but this weekend is one of those unfortunate kind of reminders that motorsports is still dangerous, no matter the safety precautions that we do have.
Yeah, it makes you pause a little bit after the Sunday wreck that involved Romain Grosjean. So, but you're also sporting a nice new T-shirt there.
Yes,
I see.
I am. Yes,
nice throwback shirt. Got
to
Jimmy Johnson,
the Dale Petty and Johnson shirt in. I'll be debuting another shirt later this week as well. Debuted the Benedetto one last week. So yeah, finally stepping up my shirt game when it comes to NASCAR. You got the die cast and everything in the background. Yeah. Well, I got to step up the game in the shirt. So
I like that we have a difference.
Yes,
we've got the entire NASCAR collections covered on this show. We've got the die cast side of things, and we've got the T-shirt side of things. So if you want to know what merchandise is popping off the shelves, then Kyle basically got you covered on that. And if you want Kyle Busch die cast, it's basically behind me as well. But we'll start off today, before we get into the Formula One side of things, with some news that would have broke if we recorded it on time if my AirPods had been charged. But nonetheless, LaJoie will be moving to Spire Motorsports to drive the new number 7 in the NASCAR Cup Series, and a multi-year contract signing there for Spire Motorsports. So something we've known for quite a while here, Kyle, that he was most likely going to take one of these spots, but something that came to light out of this announcement as well is that the second Spire Motorsports car, the number 77, will be a rotation, and they won't have two full-time drivers in their organization. It will just be LaJoie, and then we'll see who fills out the 77 for the remainder of the season, because they do have that charter, so they can race the full season, and that's what they're planning to. So it's going to be interesting to see who fills those roles in those certain races. But this is a great opportunity for LaJoie, up-and-coming team that's trying to invest into the sport and trying to get more integrated in it. He's not going to have a crew chief as of yet. We still don't know who that is. And they're going to be operating the entire Spire Motorsports organization out of the old Bob Levine Family Racing shop. So that's all that came out to light from Spire Motorsports today. That's one of the last NASCAR Cup Series silly season moves. It's still to be determined on what Front Row Motorsports might do for their second entry that was surprisingly moved with John Hunter Nemechek. But Corey LaJoie, a guy that was in the 32 for the past 2 seasons at Go Fast Racing, no longer really an organization within NASCAR. Down to 6 part-time races next season. So he had to jump ship, and this is a great opportunity for him in 2021, Kyle.
Yeah, this is something that has been rumored for a long time here. And when we started to see the dominoes of silly season start to fall, it kind of seemed likely that LaJoie wasn't going to get a massive upgrade that maybe he was hoping for, maybe going up to like a JTG or a Front Row or anything like that. That seemed much more unlikely as silly season went on. But this is, I like kind of the long-term play here. If you buy into what Spire Motorsports have kind of said over their entire span here in NASCAR, they've consistently said that they're here in these first few seasons to just kind of lay a foundation, get things settled, and then when next gen comes, which was originally supposed to be for next season, but now for 2 years down the road now, they're looking to be competitive. And for a guy like Corey LaJoie that doesn't have manufacturer backing or anything like that, I like this long-term play. This is a guy that I think has maybe some untapped potential, has done very well in what is essentially a backmarker car, and just maybe a little bit of a step up from that, from what you maybe would think of Spire Motorsports these last couple seasons. But going into next season, they don't have that kind of Rick Ware alliance that they've had these last couple seasons. This is their first year kind of actually on their own. They'll be getting some stuff from Chip Ganassi Racing and Hendrick Motorsports, kind of pulling from the Chevrolet ties there. And from what Corey LaJoie and from what the team are saying, they expect to be slightly more competitive than these last couple seasons. LaJoie, in kind of his announcement video, said that this will be the best car and the best engine that he's ever raced in, looking at potentially getting some top 20 finishes, which was few and far between for both Go Fast Racing and especially so for Spire Motorsports these last couple of years. So big fan of the move long-term. If you buy into what Spire Motorsports has said, I like the move for LaJoie. I like that it's a long-term thing as well. And to that point, you also mentioned that the 77, which I thought would be the full-time number, but in fact it's the 7, which is kind of cool there. Is going to remain. Yeah, exactly. So I thought that maybe they would go 2 full-time drivers this year, but only the 1 full-time driver means that you would imagine LaJoie is getting preferential treatment at that team, just given he's there season long. And if anything miraculous happens, like that summer Daytona race with LaJoie there instead of Justin Haley, well, LaJoie's running full-time for points. So technically he would make the playoffs in that kind of scenario, which I don't know if I want to think about that kind of scenario, but no, to the point here, I think this is about as good of a landing spot as LaJoie was going to get unless he went down to a lower series. I like him staying in Cup. I like him going to a team and kind of trying to build it up alongside of himself. I think that this could be a good marriage going forwards. And finally here, I like that it's the number 7 here, also getting permission with Tommy Baldwin and all that kind of stuff. From the sportsmanship side, it's great. But also, and this was tweeted out by Bob Pockers, which is kind of cool, the LFR shop was formerly the shop that was owned by Alan Kulwicki, who, of course, ran the number 7. So it's kind of like this kind of full circle kind of thing here with now a full-time number 7 moving back into that shop. So that's pretty cool as well. Maybe we can get a Kulwicki throwback at Darlington or something. That would be amazing to see.
Yes.
Maybe if Chase can maybe lend over the Hooter sponsorship or something like that, we'll see. But yeah, we've talked about it at length previously because this has been rumored for a while here. But I like this move. It seemed like it was probably best case scenario for both guys, given where silly season had gone to this point, and excited to see what Spire and LaJoie can do in 2021.
Yeah, for sure. I'd really like the tactical decision here by Spire to do 1 full-time and then 1 rotation car, because they can really test some things out with the second car and just see if something sticks, and then they can try it on LaJoie's car maybe later in the season. Not like it's going to really translate to 2022 by any means with the new car coming in, but for later on in the season, if they want to try some things early on with that second car, it definitely lends the opportunity for LaJoie to get the second half better of the season. That's usually the case with these smaller teams when they start the season off a little bit slow and then they really pick it up in the late summer months and then into the playoffs. It's difficult to try and keep up with the playoff guys because they're just going all out. But that late summer stretch, the July to August and early September, is really when you see the mid-pack cars or the back markers or whatever you want to call them, the smaller teams, really start to elevate their game. So I think this is a great move for LaJoie. It's a great kind of company-wide decision for Spire Motorsports to do this route with the 2 cars and having 1 full-time and 1 rotation. So I'm very excited to see what Corey LaJoie can do. It just maybe adds a little bit of more spice to that midfield battle there if he can try and sneak his way into to the back half of it and see what he can do from there. But this is going to be a long-term play, like you said. This is not going to happen in the first season. They're putting their pawns in place to try and go for the checkmate down the line. So any final thoughts really on this? Because there's not too much to really hash from the announcement.
Yeah, we've talked about LaJoie quite a bit, but just on the second car there, the 77, that will still be a rotation. If, in fact, no longer having the Rick Ware kind of thing and kind of moving onto their own kind of stuff for next year with the Hendrick and Chip Ganassi, if it is in fact a step up in a level, and maybe it's only slightly to go fast, maybe it's a little bit more to something online with maybe a Germain Racing where you get some of those surprise top 20s or anything like that. It'll also be interesting to see what they do in that second car, because we don't really see rotation cars that aren't kind of your back markers. So that would be interesting as well. And maybe opens the door for some people that are traditionally in those back markers to get up and be in a car that is top 25 in speed, and an upgrade over those kind of 30th on back kind of results, and see what they can do in that. And then for Spire as well, they can try out multiple different drivers for when you would assume when next gen comes in, they would go to 2 full-time drivers, and you can try out multiple different people for next year. So interested to see what happens with that 77 as well. But also just kind of generally for Spire to see if going kind of on their own away from that back marker model for next year does actually pay off in better kind of competitive level.
You wonder if someone like Ty Dillon maybe steps into that role on a part-time basis if he can't find something in the Xfinity Series, most likely for RCR, if he's going to go somewhere, or if maybe he's done with racing. Who knows? We haven't really heard anything on the Ty Dillon front. It's been kind of forgotten about, I feel like, in the silly season side of things. So maybe there's an opportunity there for him to just try and do it.
We haven't heard anything from RCR, whether that's Xfinity or Ty Dillon or anything. The only stuff we know is we obviously got Tyler Reddick coming back months ago at this point. But then other than that, it's just that Trackhouse is going to basically be a third RCR car. We haven't heard anything about what Ty Dillon would potentially do, because of course
Anthony
the
Alfredo.
RCR Alliance with Germain Racing there, Anthony Alfredo, Cascarala, Mike Snyder, like they've got a handful of drivers kind of in and associated with their team there that just kind of don't know what they're going to do for next year yet. So I imagine that ball will start rolling soon as well, and we'll kind of get some confirmations as well. But
we need some full-time Xfinity cars from RCR. I gotta say that. Come on, invest a little bit here. You had Tyler Reddick and a championship-winning car, and then nothing. I mean, you gotta step it up here a little bit. RCR.
At least one.
Come on.
At least one.
Yeah, just give me one. That's all I need. And then maybe second for owner's points. Just do that. Like, that's not asking for much, but, the love's got to go around. And, I mean, it would be pretty harsh to leave Ty Dillon out of a job if you're RCR, if he wants to come back into some sort of a role. And Austin Dillon's in the Cup Series in the number 3 car, and Ty Dillon is getting the boot, and he doesn't have a ride.
Austin was really good this year, though.
No, that's fair enough. But I'm just saying, Ty Dillon has gotten the short end of the stick in terms of the being the favored grandchild over there for Richard Childress. But
needs to step up that Christmas present game, I guess.
I guess something's got to – I don't know if there's going to be a Christmas card if he doesn't get a ride this next season, though. So it's going to be maybe like the Bush brothers did a while ago when they couldn't sit together at the Thanksgiving table because they were so mad at each other from the 2007 All-Star race wreck. But we'll see what happens there with the Dillon brothers. And but back to Corey LaJoie. Congratulations to him on getting that ride and getting something secure for
multi-year. Yep,
multi-year.
That's huge for him. So
get some job security there, and hopefully this is a sign of good things to come for Spire Motorsports. They saw a guy that's going to maybe get you a sneaky result here or there in the top 20, and who knows what the team can accomplish next season. Would you say that it's possible to get a top 10 besides super speedways? I guess it's probably out of the question, right? Like,
that's probably tough to say just because we don't really know, but just given what LaJoie said, and there's a great article from Jeff Gluck on The Athletic, highly recommend checking it out, that kind of talks with LaJoie and Jeff Dickerson, who is the main guy at Spire Motorsports for basically everything over there. It just kind of talking about why this partnership and how things will go into the future. I think top 20s are going to be the goal this year on the super speedways, maybe trying to go for those top 10s, sneak into those. Otherwise, I think they'll need some help. But I do think that we can see a Spire LaJoie car get one maybe or two top 15s at least. I'm thinking maybe on par with like the 96 results this year with Daniel Suarez.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking better equipment maybe than the 96, but I think that Suarez is probably a better driver than LaJoie or at least on par. So it's maybe something on line with those results, because the 96 did run pretty solid on the super speedways inside the top 10 a decent amount and picked up a handful of top 20s as well. So maybe those are the expectations.
Yeah, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves on this on these kind of backmarker teams. Exactly. So looking forward to Spire Motorsports' progression in the coming years, and we'll see what their kind of inaugural season, I'm going to call it, because it's really like where they're going to state their claim. So we'll see how Corey LaJoie does and how the entire organization does throughout the 2021 season in the last year with this current generation of car. Unless there's another delay, who knows? They might push it back to 2023.
No way.
Yeah, probably not. That's hopeful because of after the test. We've discussed that on what we thought about it. But nonetheless, that'll do it for the kind of news and notes section of today's episode. Just the one. It's going to slow down here over the next month or two because it is inevitable. It's coming to the holiday season, and it just leaves us a little bit more time to discuss the Formula One weekend that was in Bahrain. So before we get into the qualifying and everything that happened there in practices, the drivers tested the 2021 tire compounds. So they weren't too happy about it, to say the least. That's putting that lightly. But Hamilton was very outspoken about it, and they had very little grip. I can say that. And the shiny tires, they're a look. I'll say that. And I think the drivers would definitely prefer if they stay with the tire compounds that they have this season for next year. But what were your thoughts kind of just from the practices and just from the drivers' comments after the kind of craziness that it was with the guys trying to stay on the track for one lap?
Yeah, it was just kind of weird. To be honest, I
didn't even know they were doing it.
Yeah, I didn't know they were doing it beforehand. And it was also kind of funny that Mercedes did the most with it as well, because they're like, yeah, they got
nothing to lose.
We might as well get enough data. But yeah, it's just weird because like the cars are the exact same next year. Like there are changes that are made. So I don't really know why you would go out and get data and tests and whatnot on the current cars, but hey, I guess data is data. So from that perspective, I guess that makes sense. But it was funny to hear like 99, if not 100% complaints about it rather than kind of praise or whatever. But
yeah,
it's 2021 tires on 2020 cars. So we'll actually know how things go once we get to preseason testing next year and then eventually, hopefully, in Australia.
We'll see what happens with 2021 if it just becomes who can stay on the track the longest, essentially, from what we saw in the practice sessions. But I'm always tentative on kind of these new one-off kind of adjustments that they make for a season that is going to be the last generation of a car as well. Like, it's just not necessary in my opinion. But they have different kind of prerogatives that they want to check off, and this is definitely one of them. I'll say that. So we'll see how. I'm not going to put it down too much. It's the first test of it, really. So we'll see how it does in the off season, and then in winter testing. That's in February. That I don't really classify as winter testing.
I just call it preseason because it's testing. Not really. Yeah,
it's not. It's preseason testing, but we'll see how it all fans out for next season. But we'll go into qualifying here. The Saturday under the lights qualifying as well, so that was a nice change of pace to see some under the lights action. The cars sparking and right in the desert in Bahrain. So in Q1, Antonio Giovinazzi, Kimi Räikkönen, Kevin Magnussen, Romain Grosjean, and Nicholas Latifi were knocked out in Q1. Nothing really spectacular happened in that session. Your usual suspects that get knocked out in the first round there. George Russell does move on to the second round though, so a nice qualifying effort from him there in the opening round of qualifying. In Q2 we had Sainz spinning after a mechanical failure, and that forced a red flag. So Carlos Sainz, bad luck in Bahrain continues. So it was kind of bad going into it, but
it was so bad for him.
He recovered on race day, that's for sure. Did a solid job on the Sunday. But as a result of that, Stroll's team had miscommunication with the tire compounds for some reason. I don't know how they did it, but they ended up putting on a used set of, I think it was medium tires to send it back out there. And then he couldn't get through to Q3 because of it. He had a amazing lap time in Q1 that would have, definitely, if that held up.
Stellar Q1.
He would have moved on to Q2.
Yeah,
Q3,
it was strange in Q2 there because I don't really know how you mix that up, to be honest. I don't know.
It's not like it's the race. It's qualifying. You're going in the garage. You think one of the people that are in that garage area would be like, hey, these are the wrong tires. But
hey, you know what? It was also interesting that the whole storyline in Q2 there was all the qualifying times being on the mediums because everybody anticipated the softs being such a terrible race tire. But once we got to race day, the softs actually weren't as bad as people thought. So
one stop for Gasly, right? Like
exactly.
Did a sensational job.
In that regard, it was kind of interesting how the storyline almost completely flipped on race day there. In terms of the tires and degradation and everything like that. But yeah, just a bad mistake from Racing Point there. And unfortunate for Lance because, he did look strong in Q1 there. And you thought that if he was maybe given the proper tires that he would be up there, maybe not alongside Perez because he had a really strong entire kind of weekend as a whole. But you figure Q3 certain.
Close. Yeah. It's unfortunate for Stroll. He just can't catch a break. Yeah. It's been a rough go here and there for him, getting that pole, but then struggling on the race day in Turkey. Like it's just one after the other kind of thing. He just can't gain momentum.
Lando Norris on like the cut line for all of for Q1 and for Q2 there, going out on his last qualifying lap and everyone else behind me is already done their lap, so I can just go and park it as well. That was kind of funny as well.
Yeah, that's true. That was a bummer for Stroll. He would get knocked out in Q2 there, along with Sainz, who didn't manage to set a lap time due to his spin. So those are two guys out, and then the Ferraris of Vettel and Leclerc. Vettel ahead of Leclerc there in 11th and 12th, and then George Russell was in 14th there. So, he would have been 15th, but with Sainz non-lap time, moves up to 14th place there. So a solid effort from George Russell this weekend in qualifying, and just the Ferrari's pace, man, it's incredible to see the difference from one year to the next. Like we're almost, I wouldn't say almost 2 calendar years kind of since the last time we went, but it's been a year and a half and then some since we were back in Bahrain. So just shows you that drastic drop off that Ferrari has had when they won last time out. They didn't win last. Well, they won pole last time out, but they should have won without Leclerc's
issue. Lockout, right? It was 1-2, and then this year 11 and 12. So and should have won Bahrain as well with Leclerc out front until he had his mechanical issues. So
unfortunate there. So we move on to Q3, your usual suspects, and who else but Lewis Hamilton. Kyle gets the pick right from the Thursday episode. Lewis Hamilton speeds to his 98th career pole position by over 0.2 over Valtteri Bottas in second. Verstappen was very strong this weekend, though. He was almost close to splitting the Mercedes on Saturday, and finishes third there in qualifying. Albon with a strong P4 needs to have these consistent runs here throughout the final 2 weeks now after this weekend of the season. Sergio Perez in fifth there, so not leaving him any room for error there in Albon. So we'll see how that storyline unfolds. Daniel Ricciardo in sixth, followed by his teammate Esteban Ocon in seventh, Gasly eighth, Norris ninth, and then Danny Kvyat rounds out the top 10 for qualifying. So that sets up for the Sunday kind of chaos that it was. It's so difficult to try and approach this. It would be totally different if the outcome was different. We wouldn't be as, maybe lighthearted, I guess, from everything that's happened from the opening lap. But what were your thoughts going into the race? I know we couldn't really predict anything that did happen during the race. Maybe not. Maybe the end result was predictable. But, after qualifying, it seemed like Hamilton was the guy to beat.
Yeah, and once again, it was kind of like who would pull away out of that front three and kind of have the edge there. But then after that, it was the battle for fourth place for me. Could Albon kind of translate a very solid qualifying effort into the actual P4, or would Perez or even the Renaults or anybody be able to get up past him? And kind of the best of the rest battle, who would kind of have the edge coming out of the weekend in constructors as well, because as we mentioned on Thursday's show, just how close everything is going into the weekend there. And also Lance Stroll down there starting at 13th, would he be able to climb up the grid in the Racing Point that looked much faster than the qualifying result?
Yeah, the midfield battle was just going to be, it seemed to be extraordinary. Yeah. And it was pretty good on Sunday. Maybe it wasn't as great as we would have liked to have been, but the end results kind of left you wanting more and felt like you kind of got, I guess, kind of screwed over is probably the best way. We just didn't quite get that battle that we were looking for the constructors because of certain incidents. So without further ado, let's get into the Bahrain Grand Prix. Yes. Hamilton gets a good launch off the line. Bottas struggles, and he falls back all the way to 6th after the first set of corners. And then there's chaos in the middle of the pack. It didn't take long. After the first hairpin, or I guess the first corner, then you go into the kind of S curve that they've got there in turns 2 and 3. And then some cars are going off. I think Raikkonen went to the left, and he was going through the gravel or way off the racing line to the left. The Racing Point of Lance Stroll was cutting through the other side of things. The Ferraris were banging next to each other. It was just chaos there in the opening lap as everybody was just fighting for position on the track. So as a result of that, Romain Grosjean saw a Raikkonen on the left side, so he tried to move, anticipating that Raikkonen would come back onto the racing line, like right in front of him. So he moves to the right, and unfortunately for him, Danny Kvyat's left front tire was there. And I got to tell you, I didn't watch it live. I didn't get up for the 6 a.m. start, but when I turned on the TV and there was 10 laps left to go at about, I guess, 8:30 my time. So the race is less than 2 hours. So there was about 10 laps left in the race, and I was not anticipating the race to be on when I turned it on. So I knew something happened. And then I went to my phone and I saw all the pictures. So pretty scary stuff here as Romain Grosjean goes head on into the Armco barrier that's there. So if you don't know what Armco is, it's basically just metal, and there's 2 gaps in between. So like 3 different pieces of metal. And he hit head on into that, and the car split in half, and the car went up into flames as a result of, I guess, fuel leaking. They didn't say it was too much fuel, though, so they think something went wrong in that capacity there, but a huge ball of fire, and somehow Romain Grosjean was able to escape from that wreck. It was just breathtaking. I still can't believe it after looking at the replay multiple times. I think they showed it, like they were very respectful in the opening. They didn't show it or anything because they knew something really bad was happening. And I mean, I counted he was in there for about 20 seconds in a ball of fire, and I don't know how he got out of that alive. And it's so unfortunate for Romain Grosjean to kind of end his F1 career here like the way it did. But it was an incredible wreck. I can't believe how it all transpired there. It was just racing. Nobody did really anything wrong. It was just a racing incident. And, I mean, it just goes to show you how incredibly safe these cars are. Without the halo, we're looking at an opposite end of the spectrum here in terms of the outcome. You don't want to say what could have happened, but we all can infer what happened if the halo wasn't there, and it's a life-saving tool. Romain Grosjean in the hospital after the incident said that he wasn't for it when it was coming in. I mean, just based off of looks, it wasn't spectacular, but when it does stuff like this, I mean, you can only be grateful for the FIA and all the safety people that work tirelessly to make sure the drivers are safe. And we wouldn't be having Romain Grosjean with us anymore if it were not for those safety measures. So 5 years ago, we're looking at a very different outcome. Maybe even 3 years ago, we're looking at a different outcome. So what were your thoughts there on the incident, Kyle? It was just a racing deal, but very thankful that Romain Grosjean was able to escape by himself under his own ability and walk away from the incident.
Yeah, it was just shocking because it's not something that I've ever seen watching Formula One live, and it's an image that you maybe never thought you would see anymore, just because there's no refueling or anything like that. So there's not going to be any fires in the pit lane or anything like that unless something dramatic happens. And the way that the cars are built, and barriers and all the technology involved, you don't expect to see something like that where a car gets split in half. And the fuels, I don't exactly remember of what they were saying on the broadcast as to where the fuel came from, but it wasn't like the fuel cell or anything like that, because there would have been a lot bigger fire and a lot more. But you don't expect to see fire in an F1 race. You expect to see it in NASCAR just because it's much different, and NASCAR's done a great job of limiting how fire can impact drivers and crew members and everything like that. Just watch any time an engine goes up and there's fire, and the extinguishing that the cars have. It's insane technology. But on F1 side of things, we don't see that kind of stuff because it's a very different style of everything there. You don't see cars go up like that. And so when we also experienced the crash very differently, because you watched it knowing that something had happened, whereas I was watching the broadcast live when it happened, thanks to that nice little time difference. But watching the live broadcast, it was also a remarkable shot for when the crash happened as well, because they have the shot at the end of the straight there. So you see all the cars coming towards you, and all the focus is at the front, because you've got Hamilton coming out with the lead. You've got Verstappen in second, but then you've got Bottas dropping like a rock. And so your attention is kind of focused on the front there and the jostling for position there. And you know, chaos always happens in the middle pack and onwards back. And it's part of the reason why after one lap, you're able to get such big gaps between cars. But all of a sudden you just see this explosion out of the kind of top left of the screen, but more like middle left of the screen. And you just kind of hear just kind of the tone of the commentators as well change immediately. And I honestly had no clue what I was watching. I didn't know if like there was some kind of like obviously you see the car kind of go off, but I didn't know if like the car had hit something explosive, or if it was the car itself or what. And I want to give props to the broadcast as well, because they held off the replays not only until they knew Grosjean was okay, but also until they knew that there were no marshals or anybody harmed as well, because they could have easily seen Grosjean get out of the car, go over to the middle of the car, and then immediately played it afterwards. But it was a solid few minutes until they played it on the broadcast afterwards. So I want to give props for that, because I do know that they were getting some stick afterwards just for playing it as much as they did. And I feel like that's a different conversation. They did kind of overplay it a little bit, but there's only so much you can do when there's an hour-long break between action and you don't have anything planned. But I was glad that they did that in the first place, because I think a lot of people just see the driver go out and they're like, okay, everything's okay. But there's tons of people in and around the track racing area, volunteers, marshals, everything. So I was glad that they did that. But the images afterwards, like I would say that, and I don't know about you, but watching it live, at least, it was more shocking than Ryan Newman's wreck from earlier this year, just because of the fact that the car was split in two, which is something you never see in F1, and the fire and everything involved with it. I thought it was a more shocking wreck, and you don't really want to do like comparisons between wrecks and what was worse and whatever, but watching both live, and obviously Newman's wreck was insane, but that Grosjean wreck just scared the life out of me. Like I watching it live, and before you knew anything that had happened afterwards, I genuinely thought that I'd watch somebody die. You just don't see that kind of wreck and see somebody get out of it. And everything went perfectly wrong for that wreck to happen in the first place and have that severity of it and everything like that. But it also went perfectly right in order for Grosjean to escape with minor injuries. Like, the guy didn't even fracture anything. Like, how do you have a 53G wreck going into an Armco barrier at 220 plus kilometers an hour at that angle and get out with and have the car get torn in two, get the cockpit get stuck in the Armco barrier, have that much fire, and escape with burns on your hands and ankles? Like, it's insane that he was able to get out like that. And a shout out to the marshals, to Dr. Ian Johnson, I believe
Roberts.
Excuse me, Dr. Ian Roberts, and then the medical car driver as well, Alan Vander Merwe as well, for the quick response time. Just incredible. I can't imagine what's going through their mind as they pull up to that and have to basically run into a car that's on fire like that and try to find a driver. Just insane. But thankful that we're able to talk about it today in relatively light spirits. Obviously, it's not fun to talk about. Obviously, it's still an awful, awful accident, and best wishes are with Romain. But a few things go differently, and we're talking about this in a very different tone. And it's just kind of, as I said off the top, one of those incidents that reminds you just kind of the peril that drivers are in, even with all the safety measures and everything like that. And even though Grosjean is able to walk away from that incident with just a few minor injuries, a few things, a few inches, anything like that, and it's a very different scenario. So I have no words for all the safety measures the FIA have taken, all the technology that goes into these cars and the suits and helmets and everything like that. And that obviously needs the major focus, but this is just full stop, a miracle. Like the fact that he was able to escape with that few injuries. Yes, all the technology did its job, everything like that. But even with all the technology and like that, you expect like a broken ankle or a broken rib or something along those lines. But just a few burns, basically where the suit stops and the gloves start, and then where the suit stops and the boots stop. Like, it's crazy, crazy stuff. And so I hope I don't have to see anything like that again, but it's motorsports, so it's an inevitability. But yeah, just extremely thankful for everything involved in motorsports, and when you see a wreck like that and somebody's able to walk away from it, because we're not far removed, as you mentioned there. 3 years ago this wreck happens, it's probably a very different outcome. So there's obviously a lot to take out of this wreck that can go towards safety going into the future. But I think both yesterday after the race and today, I think just the prevailing kind of feeling is just kind of thankfulness for the lack of severity in regards to Grosjean's condition, and the fact that we were able to continue racing and will continue racing the rest of the season without kind of any black mark or anything like that from that wreck.
Yeah, it's probably the scariest wreck I've ever seen. Yeah, man. It was just breathtaking. I can't believe the images that came out from it, both video and pictures. Just seeing him struggle to get out of it, find a way out. I can only imagine the panic and the adrenaline that's rushing through him. Like, his life's on the line, and he somehow got out. And
sitting in a ball of fire.
And he went out the halo on the side. Like, he didn't even go out from the top, and it was just incredible. The pictures of the halo stayed virtually intact. Like, it's incredible. And I watched a video from WTF1 today of like the kind of everything that happened on why the car split in half, and it's actually meant to split in half there.
Yes,
if it's going to.
Everything
was designed. Yeah, exactly. So it was just, just to hear the drivers' reactions as well. Like, they knew it was bad. Like, Leclerc, Vettel, like, they were just asked, like, they didn't even get to the pit lane. They asked about 4 or 5 times, is he out of the car? Is he okay? They're waiting for an update. I can only imagine the people on the pit wall, because they can kind of see the images a little bit.
They've got TV feeds. Like,
exactly. So they have an understanding, but they don't want to stress the drivers out anymore or anything like that. Obviously, the red flag was displayed right away. It was an hour cleanup, and I'm sure they're going to dissect everything like that, everything that was a part of that wreck, the Armco, the car, everything that happened and why there was such a big fire, because that was probably the biggest concern, along with why the Armco failed essentially, because that used to be a thing back in the day where it would kind of just wreck a car and it would end up taking drivers' lives back then. So very, very thankful that Romain Grosjean is still with us today. He's in the hospital currently. He's going to get released tomorrow. Whenever you're listening to this, it would be Tuesday. So he'll be released, and we'll see. He's done for the season, most likely. We'll see what happens if he wants to come back for Abu Dhabi, if he's fit to race and he's cleared to race. But I just couldn't believe that could happen, really. I'd never seen an F1 wreck that bad. I've seen a lot of wrecks in NASCAR that take your breath away.
Expect those in NASCAR.
The Newman one was definitely probably the scariest one that I've seen in the NASCAR side of things. But this one was just on a whole different level in terms of the fire, the car split in half. I mean, he got out of that under his own power. Like, that is incredible. Like, no one had to drag him out. Like, I think about something, I mean, I wouldn't say similar, but Niki Lauda's wreck when he had his fire.
That's the first one that just comes to mind because it's the most famous wreck involved with a giant ball of fire, essentially.
And it's in a movie. Like, it's just been recreated. Like, right? So, and you look how different it ended up for Niki. And when you look at Romain, who has burns on his hands, obviously that's unfortunate, but he can thank his lucky stars. He had his guardian angel with him, and it's just remarkable to see that he was able to walk away from that. As you said, though, the heroes of the day, the safety workers, the marshals, the people in the medical car, Dr. Ian Robertson, medical car driver, Alan Vandermeer, they did a sensational job. That's what that car is there for. And you sometimes, when I first got into the sport, like about 6-7 years ago, I was like, why do they have a car falling around at the back? But it's cases like that on Sunday that really prove why they're there. And they did their job to the best ability that they could, considering the circumstances of approaching a big ball of fire. I mean, I can't imagine what the emotions that are going through their head, but they did a great thing. And I'm very, very thankful that we didn't see anything much, much worse happen, because it could have easily gone that way. So it's just so heartbreaking that, you know, Romain, who's on the end of his F1 career, has to go through this. And, you know, it's the last thing you want to see happen to anybody. And I think the thing that drives me, I think the biggest pet peeve that I have with people is about racing in general, is that it's not a sport. And this instance cannot be further from the truth than that. Like, it is the epitome of a sport what these guys do. We take for granted the amount of bravery that it takes for these guys to go in there in a car that goes 330 kilometers an hour for Formula One, for NASCAR about 180 now with their rules package. But nonetheless, we take for granted on how much they put on the line. They put their lives on the line each and every week. And we just, you know, for most other sports, that's not the case, right? Basketball, football. I mean, there's long-term injuries that can happen from that, sure. But you're not going in there with a percentage of chance, even though it's very low nowadays, that you could pass away from an accident. If it goes one way, one thing wrong, one thing leads to another kind of thing. I think when people say they don't think it's a sport, that drives me nuts, because it is one of the most bravest things you can do in all of sports. And it just burns me up inside. Just like people can have the audacity to say something like that, or not to say that I saw it a little bit on social media after this incident, like, oh, who cares? It's just yada, yada, yada. Like, screw you. Like, this is somebody's life that they're putting out on the line. You wouldn't have the balls to do something like what they're doing out there. So very, very thankful. The impact speed for Romain Grosjean was 137 miles per hour and 53 Gs, as Kyle said earlier. So an incredible force of impact there. And people were like, oh, that number's fake. No, they have sensors in the car to measure that. So it's taken from the car itself and from the data that they have. So I am just very, very grateful that Romain Grosjean was able to speak to us the day of the incident. And
few hours.
It just blows your mind that people can survive something like that and walk away with such minor injuries in the grand scheme of things. No concussion. Han's device did its job. It's just incredible, the technology. 20 years ago, we lost Dale Earnhardt coming up in this February. Just think of how much progression has taken throughout safety in all of motorsports since then. And we've had very rarely somebody pass away from a wreck at a track. There's been certain things that have happened. Of course, that's always going to be happening in motorsports, but there's never not going to be a risk of something happening to you. But the fact that the safety's come a long way and the product itself hasn't suffered too much because of the safety measures in place, I think they can give themselves a round of applause. And that's why I'm so happy to be a motorsports fan, because when I see what the effort that goes into each and every race, each and every weekend, each and every season with the safety measures, with the cars, and, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? They're just yada, yada, yada. I want it back to the 90s. Well, if we're going back to the 90s with this stuff, we're losing a lot of very, very talented people, very, very talented race car drivers. And I think the future is very bright in terms of the safety, and it can only get better. We're not going to go back to what we had. This is the future. And if we can save as many drivers' lives as possible with wrecks like these, hopefully it never happens again. But if it does, then we're going in the right direction, and we've taken the right steps to go in. They're the right steps in place, So we had to spend so much time on this. There's so much more we can rehash about this. Thankfully, he's going to be out of the hospital here in a matter of hours, it seems, in Bahrain time, I guess, when you convert it. But very, very thankful that Romain Grosjean is alive. And, I'll never forget it. I will never forget this incident, this race. I can't imagine what was going through the drivers' heads of having to hop back in the car after something like that, because they had an hour to process it. I'm sure they were looking on social media for the latest updates or hearing it from people and watching it on the screens. I know some of the drivers, like you said, were vocal about it, but I think they handled it very, very well. And you can never prepare yourself for something like that in terms of the behind-the-scenes aspect of it. So I think they handled it to the best of their ability. Sure, there were some things that they probably could have handled a little bit better in terms of showing the replay constantly. But like you said, it's difficult to have something on hand as a backup that they can showcase. You can only interview the drivers so much and so on. So props to the broadcasting team on handling in the moment the right way of just keeping it on the cars that were moving instead of going to Romain Grosjean. And they showcase, because of course it's going to be a huge talking point no matter what happened there. So it was just important to ensure that Grosjean got safely away from the scene, and the images that they showed with him emerging from a ball of fire, there's no other way to describe it, is just remarkable. So it's just, it's just so incredible that he's alive. Just crazy. So any other thoughts with this? Because, we could talk about this all day long, really. It's just the safety to Romain Grosjean's F1 career. There's so many different ways you can go about it. And for it to kind of most likely end like this is a bitter pill to swallow for him. But I'm sure that he'd rather walk away the way that he did instead of another way in the back of an ambulance fighting for his life. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on maybe what I said or any other thoughts that you've got in terms of the wreck?
Yeah, just finally, I think people that maybe don't know a ton about motorsports, or even just motorsports fans that don't necessarily know a bunch about the vehicles themselves, will see an accident like this and assume that the safety measures failed in this case, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The one thing that didn't necessarily do its job to the way that it's planned, or to, I guess, would be the barrier itself, and the fact that it split in a way that could either impale or trap the driver, and the fact that fuel in some way was released from the car after the accident and caused the fire. Outside of those two things, everything did what it was supposed to do. And when you see an accident where a car either splits or has a ton of debris and disintegrates, to use a word, people see that and assume that things are failing. But that's how it's designed to do, because the most dangerous aspect of a crash is the energy created in it. And that's why you can see some crashes that maybe look innocuous or don't look that bad, but result in bad driver injuries, head-on impacts, anything like that. It's because of the energy involved. So when a car, in this case, like this accident, splits in half, or the barrier kind of caves in on itself or splits a little bit, that's actually better for the driver because it's dissipating the energy involved in the crash. It's going to other things rather than the center of the car or to the cockpit and the driver. It's going to the rear end of the car, and that's why it's splitting, and the energy is going through to that. It's going through into the barrier, and that's why the barrier has damage and stuff. Obviously, you don't want scenarios where the barrier is damaged in a way that, like in this wreck, essentially traps the cockpit and keeps the driver in a position that could have been deadly in this case, or impale anybody, which is why we see other kinds of barriers, like safer barriers and other kind of barriers used in Formula One and whatnot. The things are designed in a way to keep the driver safe, and essentially every aspect of that came through in this crash, which is remarkable because it's not like you can necessarily prepare for an accident like this, or like any really accident. It's just kind of putting all the science and all the technology into something, doing all the testing, and then hoping that you never have to find out if it actually works in kind of a real life setting. And thankfully in this real life setting, everything essentially worked to what it was designed to do. So I said it multiple times, but it's important and it deserves rehashing. Thankful to everybody in motorsports that has worked so hard over these years for safety and technology. As you mentioned there, we're only a few short months away from the 20th anniversary of Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death. And in that crash, he wasn't wearing a Hans device. And 20 years later, a Hans device is probably the most
standard.
Standard safety equipment is something that we don't even think of as an option or anything like that. In today's cars, there's so many, regardless of series, there's so many technological and safety enhancements and advancements made. It's truly remarkable, and makes you just thankful for everybody involved in motorsport that we're at a point where we can have a crash like that and the driver is able to talk and speak to you later that day with a couple minor injuries.
Yeah. I think I watched another WTF1 video a while ago where they showed like the fire suit and everything like that and how light it is, but the fact that light of material is that fireproof and
crazy, and
it keeps the drivers that safe is just remarkable technology, and it's just breathtaking that Romain Grosjean is still with us. So, I mean, we don't want to spend too much more time on it just because we got to get to the rest of the race, but it's important to note that Romain Grosjean is okay, and he was able to get away from the wreck under his own power, and luckily for him that the safety workers were there on scene to try and extinguish it as best as they could, and he luckily had the mindset and the intuition to emerge. This is why the drivers test it. They test it themselves to escape from a carnage like this on different angles and how they can maneuver to get out of it. So it's not like they haven't done this before. They have some sort of testing in the off season where they can try stuff like this out. And I'm sure that Romain Grosjean he has a different mindset of how this whole Halo thing is now after that wreck. And
everyone should.
I'm very glad that he addressed that as well, because he that's the first thing he thought of when in his kind of media statement out on social media, that I was against it, but now it's probably the greatest thing you've ever voted for in the history of Formula One. So when you hear somebody's perspective change that drastically after obviously a huge life-changing moment such as this, it definitely shows you that the FIA are doing everything in their power to make sure they're as safe as possible for the drivers. So it makes me wonder a little bit why they wouldn't have something like a safer barrier or something like that around some of these tracks, because it does seem like that could be a logical solution as well. But I'm sure there's a lot of smarter people than myself that understand that side of things. But just when you look at NASCAR and how safe their stuff has been with the safer barrier, and if Dale Earnhardt was wearing a HONF device, he'd probably still be with us today. So it's just crazy to think how far safety has come in just this century alone. So any final thoughts on Romain Grosjean before we move on to another kind of chaotic wreck that happened a few short laps later?
Just thankful he's still with us. And if this is how his Formula One career ends, if he isn't able to get back behind the wheel by Abu Dhabi, which it doesn't seem likely that he will be, unfortunate this is the way it goes out, because this is a driver that has had his ups and downs, to put it lightly, has received a lot of kind of hate at times from fans. But at the end of the day, this is a very, very likable person. This is somebody,
and on the track too. I mean, he's just a great personality.
Exactly. From the beginning of his career through to his days at Haas, has consistently been one of those drivers that has been extremely likable in the garage area, has done some great stuff on social media recently as well. And you never want somebody's Formula One career, or any career specifically, to end because of an injury or end with an injury or anything like that. And just hoping he can get back for Abu Dhabi just to get that one final Grand Prix, even if it isn't likely or anything like that, just because it would be a disappointing way for him to go out of the sport.
For sure. Even if he can't drive, I hope he travels with the team to Abu Dhabi and gets kind of one final send-off or something like that. He's definitely deserving of it. Doesn't have too much time to turn it around. Might as well address it now. Pietro Fittipaldi will be replacing Romain Grosjean for next week's race for the Sakhir Grand Prix, now that they're calling it with these kind of same racetrack. Guess different layout for next week's. It's a little bit different than Austria's kind of opening when they came back earlier this year. But a huge opportunity for the young kid in Fittipaldi to make his F1 debut for Haas. So not expecting too much in terms of Haas's performance this season. It's been lackluster at best. So we'll see what he can do, probably to finish out the season. But we're hopeful that Romain Grosjean, if he's healthy enough to come back for Abu Dhabi, then he can. But if not, what a memorable way to go out. No, I'm sure not the way he would have liked to. I'm sure he would have liked to have taken the checker flag in Abu Dhabi to end things. But we're going to remember Romain Grosjean, not for this wreck, but for everything else that he's done for the sport. So very, very thankful that he's still with us today. So I think we move on here, Kyle, to after the hour or so delay it was after cleaning up the mess that was the incident there for Grosjean's car and the Armco and everything like that, and having to install a new one in its place just in case. The drivers got back out on the grid, and I don't know how they did it, to be honest. It just takes incredible courage to go out there after seeing something like that. And they go for a standing start once more. And the outcome was very much the same, as Lewis Hamilton gets off the line well. Verstappen slots into second ahead of Perez, who almost got him there for second, but Verstappen did a nice move there to kind of pinch him off on the exit of turn one. And then as the beginning of the second sector, unfortunately, Danny Kvyat's left front tire was the culprit once again, as this time it was definitely more of his fault, as you put it probably in a place that he shouldn't have been, and Lance Stroll had no idea he was there. And after making contact with Danny Kvyat's left front tire, which has got to be made of an incredible material, I got to be honest, how it's handling these impacts. But nonetheless, Lance Stroll ends up flipping. If this was any other race, that would be the talking point. But for this one, it's an afterthought, to be honest. Lance Stroll's flip that was. But luckily, Lance Stroll was able to be okay after this. Obviously, out of the race, just one after another after the qualifying. His teammate showed pace in the race, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Lance Stroll, just his bad luck continues this season. Hasn't gotten the results when he should. And this one was definitely not one of his doing, Kyle.
Yeah, it was sort of a racing incident, but Kvyat did end up getting a penalty, and you can definitely see why. Just kind of put it in there when he should have either backed off or committed more so that it wasn't just kind of this awkward kind of in between where he ends up tagging Stroll's right rear. And yeah, just kind of one of those things where just the angle of it just kind of sends him up and over.
Just a weird one.
Yeah. And again, people will see that and probably freak out or anything, but that's a fairly tame accident in terms of driver safety or anything like that, thanks to things like the halo and everything like that. So it was kind of funny, them going to the shot of him upside down and then bringing up the sound bite of just hanging upside down. That was pretty good. And kind of was a bit of a needed kind of comic relief of sorts, just kind of after the massive accident that you'd had and everything like that, and immediately having another fairly decent sized accident, just given you don't see cars upside down in Formula One too often either. That was nice to see as well, just because when you just after what had happened on the first start, you just have it in your mind of, oh God, please not anything again.
Yeah.
And then coming out of the second sector, you just see a car dropping down the standings and you see the yellow flag, and then you don't see the camera move quick or anything like that. And you're like, oh no, essentially. And even with like Crofty and everything, just kind of his tone as well, just not quickly going to it or anything like that. You're just like, please not anything again. And thankfully it wasn't anything big, but despite a car being upside down. And the Stroll soundbite was pretty funny. But yeah, as you mentioned there, for some of the highs that Stroll's had this season, he's definitely had some bad luck. And if he can maybe get some consistent luck, maybe the public opinion of him would be increased, because he's had some really bright moments this season. But there's just been a string of unfortunate, unlucky, whatever word you want to describe it, incidents and results that have kind of taken away what was some really good early season momentum. I believe after at least a handful of races, he was up in the top 5 or 4th in the Drivers' Championship. And since then, there's been some mechanical failures. You think to Mugello, I believe it was, where he had the big off due to the mechanical failure, and then missing a race because of COVID, and qualifying on pole, but then getting some slight damage to the wing that completely destroyed his tires, like all these kind of things. And then obviously this one now that wasn't any of his doing. Just a few unfortunate results this season for Stroll, and what's been some bright spots and some lowlights as well.
Yeah, if Stroll gets the results, Racing Point is running away with 3rd place in the constructors, right?
Yeah.
Like, if he finishes the races where he should technically finish them, then
even Perez too. Like,
yeah, I mean, he missed a race, like 2 races. I mean, It's just crazy to think that Racing Point was in contention here for 3rd. We'll talk about how that kind of looks in a little bit here, but disappointing there for Lance Stroll after having the qualifying mistake. He shouldn't have even been back there. It just doesn't get anywhere close. He didn't even get a full lap under his belt for the Bahrain Grand Prix with the way it all cycled out. So unfortunate there for the Canadian driver. And Valtteri Bottas, who had fallen back after the initial start, fell back, kind of was around 4th. They gave him a generous 4th place there on the kind of restack. But nonetheless, they were playing Mercedes favoritism there. But karma got back to Valtteri Bottas, as he would have a puncture after apparently hitting some of Romain Grosjean's debris or something like that. He suffered a puncture nonetheless, and he would be sent to the back for pitting under the safety car that was for Lance Stroll. So he would start at the rear of the field, as nobody else would pit really under that safety car, period. So not much transpired after those 4 laps. I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody was kind of in let's just bring it home mode. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of things, it's just another race, and we just have to put this one past us and look ahead to next weekend. Verstappen showed some solid pace in behind Hamilton, was just never that close enough to challenge the Mercedes guy up front. Lewis said after the race, he said it was a challenge, but I mean, it would have been very interesting to see if it was a ding-dong battle between the two of them, but we'll take what we can get in terms of Verstappen showing that their Red Bull is getting closer, it's just unfortunate that they can't start the season that close. Mercedes just starts the season off so strong that it's almost impossible for the pack to catch up by that point. And Red Bull is such a team that comes on late in the season and gets these results. And it's unfortunate that we're just not quite there to having a competitive battle between two constructors at the front of the field. But the midfield battle was pretty good. We had some teammates battling throughout the race, some interesting strategy calls. Gasly on the one stop, so he was kind of in conservation mode at the end, trying to defend as much as he could, and brought it home in a points paying position in 6th place. So very solid result there for Pierre Gasly. But before we get into how it all finished, unfortunately, with 3 laps to go, there was a dry patch there. It seemed like Perez was set to get his 2nd consecutive podium for the first time in his F1 career. It would all be for naught, as with 3 laps to go, the engine expires on the Racing Point, and it was his podium would literally go up in smoke. His podium spot in 3rd place behind Verstappen and Hamilton, it was no longer the case with 3 laps to go. So he would be forced to retire. He tried as long as he could to try and troll them home.
He kept it out there for a while.
He was like, I'm not dying. This car's going to make the finish. But when it caught on fire, there are 2 fires in this race, which you rarely see at all in Formula One. 2 fires in the Bahrain Grand Prix here. Perez would pull off to the side, and a safety car would be deployed with the area that he was parked in. So the race would enter to the safety car, with Lewis Hamilton winning the Bahrain Grand Prix ahead of Max Verstappen, and Alex Albon being the beneficiary of Perez's troubles and getting his 2nd career Formula One podium. So I guess that's kind of a blessing in disguise for Albon here, that Perez kind of outraced him for the majority of the race, but the reliability ended up catching him out there. So unfortunate there for Sergio Perez. You hate to see something like that. He's had such a great season when he's been in the car. You just hate to see something like that for a guy that is looking for a ride for next season and is desperate for an opportunity, because he's definitely deserving of one. It's just circumstances have just not gone his way over there at Racing Point, soon to be Aston Martin Racing. A double points finish for McLaren, with Norris and Sainz coming home P4 and P5 respectively. Sainz going from 15th to 5th. Huge for McLaren, as they vault up to the 3rd place in the constructor standings and have a stranglehold on it now with only 2 rounds to go. It's going to take a lot for them to kind of lose that now if the pace holds up. Not saying that it's impossible that Racing Point can't make that up if they get a 4th and 5th in 2 consecutive races, and McLaren's near the end of the points, or one doesn't score kind of thing. But they put themselves in the best place possible to go into these final 2 rounds with having that extra cash in their pockets come the 2021 season. So huge day there for McLaren. I'm sure the McLaren on box will be very, very entertaining after this one, the celebration that they've got. If they do end up airing it, who knows? After everything that happened during the race, they may decide not to. But with Norris and Sainz, very, very solid drives for both drivers at the end of the day. Gasly 6th, like I said. Ricciardo 7th. So Renault a little bit behind the 8 ball. I thought they'd be a little bit better this weekend. I thought they would be maybe where McLaren was, but McLaren shocked myself personally. I said on Thursday that I thought Renault would be a little bit more ahead of McLaren, but that was not the case. Valtteri Bottas only recovered to 8th place after coming through the pack, so he's just out of mind, really. He's just kind of put the season past him. I don't think he's really in it anymore. He's going to have to find a new way to beat Lewis next season if he can, because it's going to be one tough task. But if he can, it's going to be one heck of a show. But Valtteri Bottas there in 8th when his Mercedes teammates on the top step of the podium for the 5th consecutive weekend. Esteban Ocon in 9th, and Charles Leclerc finishing the points-paying positions there in 10th. So without Perez's retirement, we're looking at Leclerc getting no points, but he does get that one solid point there for Ferrari. So Lewis Hamilton winning again, just incredible stuff from him. Just the consistency that he's had this season is just out of this world. Unfortunate there for Sergio Perez, Kyle, as the guy that we're all rooting for to try and get a ride. I don't know if I necessarily want him at Red Bull, but that's a different discussion. But Sergio Perez did everything that he could to get a podium place, but it was just all for naught.
I felt so awful for him watching that, and you could see just kind of the resilience there, trying to keep it on track for as long as he could as well. Just absolutely gutted for him, because not only does it hurt Racing Point in the constructors, now 17 points back of McLaren for 3rd after going in with the advantage in that regard, Perez falls down to 5th in the Drivers' Championship as well, 2 points back of Daniel Ricciardo, who with Perez picking up no points due to the DNF, and Ricciardo picking up maybe not the points that they were hoping for, but still a decent amount with 6 points there for a 7th place finish. Jumps into that number 4 position in the Drivers' Championship
Underrated.
as well. A decent haul there as Ricciardo jumps Perez, and Leclerc as well getting 1 point, so he's still in that mix there, just 4 points back of Ricciardo. Yeah, that's insane to say. But yeah, just a great turn of events for Albon there. Obviously, a podium's a podium. He'll take it, definitely. Would have been great if he could have got that on pace rather than having Perez have his engine expire in that regard. But you know what? 4th, regardless, would have been a pretty solid finish for Albon as well. So in that regard, maybe some positive or positivity for Albon in that case. For McLaren, just absolutely amazing, getting a 4th and 5th place finishes after what was a decent qualifying effort from Norris, and obviously Sainz recovering from 15th is just incredible to finish 5th and get 10
Very
points
good
there.
drives.
Amazing results for both of those, and they take a stranglehold of 3rd in the constructors there. They've got enough of a gap where they don't have to worry about Renault really anymore unless there's a shock result in that case, and it's just kind of the battle between McLaren and Racing Point these last 2 weekends where Racing Point have to make up like 8.5 points per race, and it's doable, but it's going to be difficult, and they're probably going to need some help as well. So, spectacular weekend. Yeah, it's doable.
With the power circuits that we've got in that Mercedes engine, I think it's definitely feasible for Racing Point to try and gain something. I think a DNF may be on the cards for McLaren here over the next 2 weeks if something happens, but they need double DNFs for Racing Point does not many favors after this weekend. Like they need Perez to score points here.
And they were on pace to have 15 points from Perez, which would have been an amazing result given Stroll was knocked out so early. And then McLaren still would have made up a couple of points on them, but they still would have been neck and neck. Whereas
I think they would have jumped them, but barely. Like it would have been like nothing.
And instead, it goes from like so close to 18 points there, or sorry, even more, 22 points for McLaren this weekend, and a massive jump in constructors there for them. So that's the battle to watch these last couple of weekends. It's that, and then obviously what's going to happen with the Red Bull seat. So watching the performance of Albon as well versus probably Perez, because it's come down to those two, and it's been surprisingly vocal. That is those two as well.
I know. I'm surprised that Horner's played his cards the way he has, and just the entire Red Bull kind of paddock. Like they are not leaving Albon to any secrets really. Like they're openly saying Perez is going to get the seat really if Albon doesn't perform. But we'd obviously like to keep you, Albon. We're hoping for your success, but we have a backup plan if you don't work out, kind of thing. Like it's just incredible pressure on the second year F1 driver in Albon. Like,
and honestly, I don't hate it either, because last year the big thing with Gasly and that whole situation was the fact that they kept him in the dark essentially the entire time that they were going to make a change if the performance didn't improve anything, and kind of sprung the decision on him. Whereas in this case, they're being very, very transparent with Albon that if the results don't come, you will be replaced. And maybe it's to put the extra pressure on him to see if he can perform under those circumstances, because you would assume they would like Albon, if he is the number 2 to Verstappen going into the future, to be able to perform in those pressure situations if/when there's a title battle or a championship battle with Mercedes or whomever at that point in the future. So I don't hate it from that perspective either, but those are the two storylines to watch here going forwards here, because there's enough of a gap between McLaren and Renault now that they don't have to worry about them for 3rd. I guess maybe you could go to 4th then and look at Racing Point versus Renault, but you would have to imagine that there would be some DNFs or anything that played into that if that ends up being a storyline. And then as well, Renault to Ferrari is a decent gap, and then Ferrari with a couple decent results at Turkey have enough of a gap now to AlphaTauri as well that they don't need to worry about that. So the main thing to watch here is just kind of that 3rd place battle going into these last couple of weekends, and obviously the main storyline out of this race is the safety of the sport and the condition of Romain Grosjean. But for on-track things, a spectacular weekend for McLaren here, picking up a 4th and 5th and jumping Racing Point when Racing Point looked to have a really solid weekend, and instead a qualifying mistake puts Stroll back and has him out of the race early on, and then an engine expiring of all things with 3 laps to go for Perez. It winds up with 0 points gained for Racing Point in this race.
Yeah, it's just crazy race, to be honest, just how it all played out. Very dry from lap 4 basically onwards to a kind of just unexpected finish there for Perez. So
under safety car as well. So
yeah, to that point, I've got a couple of stats here to end today's episode. So for the 2nd year in a row, the Bahrain Grand Prix ends under safety car. So that's a funny tidbit.
It was the Renaults that spun out at the end of the race last year.
Just a crazy race there. So that was an interesting tidbit that I saw. Hamilton goes into next weekend 12 laps shy of breaking Michael Schumacher's all-time record for laps led. So that's going to be probably inevitable that he's going to get
also, kind of interesting that Schumacher still had most laps led despite Lewis having most wins by a couple of races at this point.
Yeah, just I guess fell short in some of these for Schumacher to get those wins, and also Hamilton can equal the most amount of wins in a season. The record is 13. He can equal that victory total if he wins out for the rest of the season. So he keeps that opportunity alive. I don't know if I can bet against it happening. I mean, it's just been an incredible season for Lewis Hamilton, and this is a shortened season. Let's not forget. So the pace of this man this season has just been truly unstoppable. This was his 5th consecutive win, which ties his all-time record for his career, and for the longest of his career. So most likely going to extend that next week, if things go his way. This was also Red Bull's first double podium finish since Japan in, can you name the year?
Sorry, say that again?
Can you name the year that Red Bull's last double podium was?
Oh, last double podium? Well, it wasn't Gasly, so you got to go before that.
I'm putting you on the spot this time.
Yeah.
I said it on the broadcast.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to be fully transparent.
Take a guess, then.
I fell asleep for a little bit of the broadcast. I'm not going to lie. So I probably
Let's it out at the end of the episode.
But you know what? Hey, you know what?
Fair enough.
It did get a little bit stale in the middle.
I'll give you some. Yeah. Just name a year.
A year? It's been that long?
For a double podium finish?
For Red Bull, I'll say 2017 then.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in Japan at 2017 with Ricciardo and Verstappen. So there you go. Nice guess there.
Jeez,
trying to keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Geez, originally I was thinking maybe like early 2018 or something like that, but surprised that it has been basically 3 full years. That's crazy.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that stat when I saw it either. So that's all the stats really that I found really noteworthy for today's episode, but keeps you thinking a little bit for next weekend, keeps Hamilton's kind of incredible season with something to kind of look forward to here, with just considerable, with records continuing to be broken each and every week. And most likely he'll end this season with a couple more in his pocket. So just we're watching something incredible in terms of the safety in this race, and also Lewis Hamilton just dominating the field in Formula One week in and week out. So that's all the notes and stuff that I have for today's episode, Kyle. So if you have any final thoughts, take it away.
Do we want to hit on Fittipaldi now, or
yeah, we can hit on Fittipaldi.
The race here.
What do you want to do? I'm open to whatever.
Just to wrap up the race quickly. Just the main thing is that Romain Grosjean is basically okay, and that's crazy that we're able to say it in that kind of language after such a crazy accident. Just can't thank everybody in the sport enough, and honestly, I'm glad that the race was kind of dull after that, because if we had insane racing after that, So also excited going into this weekend for the outer layout. Just going to be something a little bit different.
Square.
Yes, thank you. It's a layout as well that is very unique it's not something that we really ever see in an F1 circuit, just being that power heavy. So
it's basically
going to be fun to see. Yeah, kind of. So it's going to be fun to see in that regard, just kind of maybe some reliability issues, just being that heavy on the engines and everything like that. So
come on.
Interested to see how that goes into the weekend. But of course, we'll talk about that more on Thursday.
Give me a Williams points finish next weekend. That's what I'm hoping for. George Russell, let's get your first point in F1. Come on, buddy. We believe in you. Or Nicholas Latifi. I'm good either way. I think it would be a great kind of send-off for the season. We got 2 weekends left with Abu Dhabi and the outer circuit here for the Sakhir Grand Prix. So that's all things from the Bahrain Grand Prix. But we look ahead quickly here to next weekend with Pietro Fittipaldi, like I mentioned earlier in the show, taking over for the injured Romain Grosjean. Obviously, not going to be racing next weekend and most likely not in Abu Dhabi, but that's not confirmed. So we'll see how that goes. But he's been the reserve driver for Haas this entire season, and he was actually on the post-race show with Will Buxton.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was right there in the action, got to talk about it a little bit. So there's not too many expectations on this kid going into next weekend. F1 debut, though, so that's a great opportunity for him. But what are you thinking here for a very suitable replacement for Romain Grosjean here in Fittipaldi?
Yeah, well, for starters, I don't know if I can name the last NASCAR wheel and All-American Series driver to go out and race in Formula One, just because Fittipaldi does have that kind of unique background of course, being Brazilian. We all know the Fittipaldi name in motorsports, but being born in the United States and kind of growing up with kind of that NASCAR kind of style, and then transitioning over to open wheel in 2013 from there and taking that route. But this is a guy that we haven't really seen in a marquee series for a full season. You look over his career and you've got full seasons and some lower series and everything like that, but you've got select races in IndyCar back in 2018 with Dale Coyne, and then was going to run in 2018-19 with Dragon Speed and WEC for a few races. I don't know if it was the full calendar or anything like that, or at least a few races, but that's when he had his big crash at Spa and broke both of his legs. And in that regard, it's great to see somebody who's come back from such a big injury to make a Formula One debut. Probably not the circumstances he wanted to make a debut or anything like that, but this is somebody that's maybe a bit of an unknown talent in that regard, where we haven't seen him full-time in any big series. So it's great to see him get this opportunity. To that point as well, we had no Haas for having the same driver lineup for what feels like forever. Well, in that regard, Fittipaldi's only going to be the fourth driver to drive in a race for Haas, because of course their original lineup was Grosjean and Esteban Gutierrez, and then since 2017 onward it's been Grosjean and Magnussen. So that's going to be interesting to see as well in that regard. And yeah, just hoping that he kind of holds his own and maybe shows off some talent and maybe opens some eyes and maybe something can open up for him going into the future. But definitely a huge opportunity for him to show something on the biggest stage in motorsports here, and he's got at least one race, maybe two here, to kind of make good on an F1 opportunity.
Yeah, the Bahrain circuit has done well for one-off drivers. Remember Stoffel Van Dorn for Fernando Alonso there for his F1 debut, got a point finish. So we'll see if Fittipaldi can try and replicate that. It's a high expectations, obviously. But nonetheless, magical things have happened at this circuit. So we'll see if the outer layout presents new challenges for some other cars and they are able to capitalize, or if it just stays status quo with Mercedes just leading the pack with Red Bull second and whoever wants to take charge in that third place spot for the constructors. So be interested to see how he does in his Formula One debut. We'll see what we have to talk about on Thursday. We'll obviously preview the Sakhir Grand Prix, but the news is definitely slowing down now, which is crazy to think how much there was for that big chunk of time, but now we've got virtually nothing. So we'll see what happens for Thursday's episode. Maybe we'll have something fun planned. We'll see. Stay tuned for that. We'll see what happens. We're all busy with university right now. We're in the final couple of weeks here of our semester. So definitely stressed, but this show definitely keeps me sane. So I'll take that any day of the week. So any final thoughts before we wrap up today's episode, Kyle?
Yeah, just wrapping up here. Excited to see somebody like Fittipaldi get an opportunity this upcoming weekend. Unfortunate the circumstances that it comes in, and once again, just thankful for everybody in motorsports, for the drivers that risk what they do to entertain us motorsports fans, for all the safety workers at the track that do what they do and put themselves in the line of fire, essentially, to make sure that the drivers, if something bad happens, they're there for their safety. So and for the volunteers, the marshals, everybody involved, thankful for all those people involved and for the technological advances. As we said multiple times during the show, we can't imagine what motorsports would be like today, or even if it would be a thing today, if not for all these technological advances. So thankful for all of those. Thankful that Romain Grosjean is in good spirits, in relatively good health as well, given the circumstances, and that we can continue on here without having to deal with anything that could have happened from that accident.
Yeah, we're wishing Romain Grosjean all the best in his recovery, back to full health. Get well soon, Romain. We want you back at the track, hopefully for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But if health circumstances are not permitting, then we just are very grateful to have had you in the sport for this long. So it's just been kind of an interesting episode, that's for sure. Just trying to talk about something as I guess worldwide newsworthy, because it just gained so much traction, and for obvious reason, just the spectacular images that came out of it. So we're very, very grateful, as Kyle said it, and as we've said throughout this show, we are very, very grateful that Romain Grosjean was able to walk away, and he is still with us. And we go on to another weekend here in motorsports, another weekend in F1, and we can hopefully end the season without having to discuss anything like this, and hopefully not in the short-term or long-term future either. So very, very puts life into perspective for us after this weekend. Not to say that we're in the same circumstances as these guys, but just makes you take a second and really think how lucky we are that we're still all here. And considering everything that's going on in the world as well, it's just it's been a blessing in disguise to have everything that's happened this year, with just being in the moment, I guess, is something that I've really picked up from this year as well. And this last week, and I'm sure Romain Grosjean and many, many people watching, and the drivers and anybody in the media, anybody involved with the sport, any fan, anybody who saw the clip are thinking that as well. So I think that does it for today's episode. I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. Get well soon, Roman. We'll hopefully see you soon.